Hannah, where are you? I was like, she's disappeared. Hi, and welcome to On Collectivity, a conversation for the 2023 Emerging Writers Festival. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I'm broadcasting from, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So, hello, I am Leah, Jing, McIntosh. I edit Liminal magazine. I'm a writer and a graduate researcher at the University of Melbourne. Here with me tonight is my friend Hannah Wu, a musician and writer who's been published in all of the good places. Hannah and I thought we would begin with a quote to frame the session. It's from Decolonizing the Mind by Ngugiwa Thiong'o, who explains, "Over the years, I've come to realize more and more that work, any work, even literary creative work, is not the result of an individual genius, but the result of a collective effort." Over to you, Han.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Leah. Yeah, it's really beautiful to be with you guys today. I'm so sorry for just disappearing off screen because my dad just came back into the hotel room and knocked on the door as it was starting, so I ran off and then ran back. But yeah, so this session is titled On Collectivity, but I guess what we really we're going to talk through in this session was the notion of collaboration, which I think is a driving force and the motor of both Leah and I's practices. Because yeah, me and Leah met ages ago in 2019 when she commissioned me to create a collaborative work with Danny Silva Soberano. But yeah, I think it was through that where a lot of our creative communities were formed and kind of nurtured. And it's something that, yeah, forms the kind of foundation for a lot of our friendships, our work life, our practices, and our thinking. So yeah, we thought we'd structure the conversation through three main and interlinked questions. So the first question is, what does collaboration mean? And specifically, I guess, more in the context of arts and literature. And our second question is, what can collectivity look like in the arts? Which is also a realistic question and is something that I think is rife with antagonism as well as possibility. So the third question that we'll kind of end on is, I guess, what makes for a good collaboration? And in talking through what a good collaboration is, we'll probably problematize the notion of a good collaboration as well, and kind of, and how to structure and frame collaboration.
Let's see how many times we can say the word collaboration in this session.
You have to drink every time.
Finally, because Hannah and I, we've worked together a couple of times throughout the years, we're going to think through our own collaborations with one another as a way to answer these questions that we've posed and kind of have answers to, but also interested to see what will come out of this conversation. And then later in the session, if we have time, we'll show a piece that we made earlier this year for the State Library of Victoria. And any Q&A, feel free to ask questions throughout and we can try to answer them and see how we go, but no promises. So just to begin, Hannah, I met you in 2019. I commissioned Hannah as an artist for a project that Liminal produced in partnership with the National Institute of Dramatic Arts and Multicultural Arts Vic, I think. The project itself was called Silent Treatment, and it involved 4 pairs of artists, and we asked each pair to create a multi-sensorial work in response to the theme of silence. So I was wondering, just to kick us off, if you would speak a little to your experience in this project, because I feel like from what I can see and what I can tell, it was quite generative for you as an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. it's a really interesting project because I think everyone responded to the theme of silence quite differently, and we kind of looked like I know that like one pairing kind of looked at silence in terms of like a form of violence or like a form of like repression, and then other kinds of and then another like pair looked at like silence as like a common form of comfort and like of being together with others. And yeah, there were all these kind of different ways of thinking through silence. And in Danny and I's collaboration, we kind of looked at silence in relation to like ambience and how it can kind of form the background of like a context, and it can be kind of transformed, like when it's brought into the foreground, much in the sense that ambient music functions in that way, because there's like this kind of quote which is by Brian Eno, where he talks about like ambient music like kind of functioning like furniture. So it's like it's something that sits in the background and you don't really notice, but it kind of creates the atmosphere of the room. And then it can also be brought to the foreground when you sit down on it and then activate as it through its function. Yeah, and then I think we were kind of playing with that idea of like furniture music and then ambient music and silence, and kind of the breaks that occur in music and poetry. So like the kind of negative space that occurs in like poetry particularly. Sorry, that was really rambly. I haven't actually did that one.
It was making me
so
think
like
about
I can't talk about it anymore.
It was good. Continue.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking about furniture now and how furniture is like a collective kind of, like it's like you're creating seating and comfortable spaces for your viewer almost. So collaboration comes within like who you're responding to, like Brian Eno, but then also for your viewer, which I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, definitely. It was like very phenomenologically inflicted, and yeah, and we were just kind of playing with like, yeah, furniture is this kind of silent background that also creates the atmosphere. But yes, I guess like in terms of the collaborative aspects of it, the collaboration really formed the basis of like most of my close friendships today. And it was also, sorry, I just dropped something on the floor. And it was also like a huge turning point, or like the gateway drug into like my community of Asian creatives, which is kind of funny. And yeah, I think like I guess the thing that I really got out of that experience of working together was that it really takes like working and being together with others who share a similar orientation towards the world and who can also relate to a shared history of racialization. That helps you realize like what you were missing previously. Because I think previously, like before kind of entering that community, I intellectually knew that like race was kind of a primary determinant in structuring my world. But I like didn't have the experience of actually being around other like Asian creatives and being in that environment where I was so surrounded by others who shared yeah, had this kind of shared history and had this kind of shared ethos. And it kind of really made me realize how the extent to which race was like a structuring factor that contributed towards like not feeling confident with making creative work earlier, just because of how naturalized the white industry is. And yeah, finding that community of like Asian creatives through like LIMINAL, and finding other like-minded people, we were really able to like establish this foundation of support and generosity. And yeah, it really formed the grounds for collaboration. And yeah, it made me like, it also I think on like a kind of more existential level or something, it really, yeah, it really made me reevaluate my life. And like, it was kind of really beautiful to like be able to work through a lot of like racial problematics as well, with friends and having conversations like in that time, because it was so new to me. But yeah, I wanted to like kind of make that reference to Zora Neale Hurston's artwork, which is really beautiful, and it's in Claudia Rankine's book Citizen. But it's called I Don't Always Feel Colored. I Feel Most Colored When I'm Thrown Against a Sharp White Background. And it's like this black text on two pieces of paper. On one side, it says, I don't always feel colored. And then the other page says, I feel most colored when I'm thrown against a sharp white background. And then the kind of text starts with just like clear black text. But as it kind of moves down the page, it starts to obliterate itself through this like overlaying process, and it's a really beautiful artwork. But yeah, I guess that is
Wow.
I guess that is to say that that kind of artist uses that technique to articulate the feeling of like being scrutinized or racialized, and made acutely aware of her like embodiment under the colonial gaze, and then it's juxtaposed against when she feels freed from that gaze, which is when she doesn't always feel colored.
I feel like that's exactly the kind of space we were trying to make with that work. And it could have been terrible. Like I didn't know many of the people we were asking like to come work with us. It was like a complete chance. But I think the thing that worked best in Silent Treatment is it wasn't overtly about race. And I think in 2019, as an emerging writer or an emerging artist, you kind of, as a racialized person, you're expected to kind of shill your trauma, to kind of talk about being racialized, but by bringing together all these Asian, well, it was predominantly East Asian artists in one space who had like similar experiences. It was like we didn't have to talk about race, we could talk about other things. So we didn't have to be thrown against that sharp white background in a way.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good way of framing it. So you can hear my dad talking in the background.
This is a collaboration with all of the woos. It's good. Does he want to come in?
Does my dad want to say hi? I mean, you can try this in the background. Anyway, yeah, that's a really beautiful way of framing it, Leah. And yeah, I guess I wanted to like ask you a question, and I guess it's like flipping the project back on you. But yeah, how did you find working on that project as like a organizer? It's my dad. Oh.
This is great. This is great. Hi.
Hi.
I feel like he features in your essay for Liminal, so this is good.
Sorry, he just asked if you were my teacher.
No, just friend. Thank you, Hannah's dad.
The OG collaborator.
Yeah, he created the best, arguably the best artwork. Hannah Wu.
Yeah, he collaborated with my mum on a baby. Excuse me.
Pause.
Sorry.
Let's return.
Sorry. Oh my god. Sorry. Anyway, cool. So yeah, I guess I wanted to ask you the question was like, how did you find working on that project? Because you were not only like a collaborator, but you were also like an organizer, a facilitator, you're a curator. You like had to bring everyone together, and also this was a group of people that you didn't know and who didn't know each other. So obviously you had to occupy this kind of like mummy role, which
no, I knew you were gonna say that word.
Because Leah's the mummy of all Asian creatives in Melbourne.
No, absolutely not. Well, I feel like thinking back, Silent Treatment could really have only ever happened at that point. So it happened in 2019, before COVID hit, and we just really didn't realize how lucky we are, I don't think, because we were coming together every week for this development that culminated, I think, in 8 weeks of development every Sunday or something. And I just feel like everyone involved, including myself, was still very much what I would term like emerging. We were all emerging artists. So it feels like that moment was like quite key to all of our careers in a way, where we were meeting each other and figuring out what collaboration could look like over like multiple, like it wasn't just one thing, it was really over a span of time. And I was thinking today that this is like my answer to the question of what good collaboration in the arts can look like. It's like something that you build together. So trust and respect, which we kind of built by coming together every week they really need to exist before you moved into a space of intimacy that I think true collaboration really needs. So yeah, I feel like quite lucky that it all came together at the time, because who else? There was Nonchalant Flower Boy, Jamie Marina Lau, Panda Wong, Danny Silva Soberano, Tracy Chen, Kezia Yap. Who am I forgetting? And then we had like James Liu, who's and you. Yeah, but and it was just, yeah, and Angie Pie. How could I? But it was such a specific moment where I think everyone is now probably doesn't have enough time to do that kind of work. At present, like 4 years on. So it kind of speaks to, like, if you are an emerging writer, which I presume most of our audience is tonight, just how exciting it is to be witness to and to work with other emerging artists, because you end up creating hopefully really strong relationships across time, would be my, yeah. But let's stop talking about silent treatment. I feel like we've, I mean, at that point, I feel like during that development period, we had a writer drop out of interviewing Andy. And I know that you just felt, you're like, I'll do it. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. And I was really grateful for it. So I was just wondering, would you like to speak a little bit about interviewing Andy for us?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, it had perfectly aligned at that point in time. And yeah, like Andy was like my first friend when I moved to Melbourne from New Zealand. So I remember like you mentioning it and I was like, what? That's crazy. I'll interview Andy. And yeah, that was a really special experience as well. Just like being able to work with an old friend who we had already had like a pre-established like friendship with, so I wasn't really thrown in the deep end, and just kind of teasing out the aspects of what he was thinking about his work. Because I think we had a really interesting interviewing process where I think it was one of those interviews where it took a lot of different goes of like trying to articulate the same thing over and over again, but using different words in order to figure out what he was trying to say. In the sense that like we were kind of like figuring out what Andy thought about his practice because he hadn't actively or consciously reflected on it previously. So like in the process of conversation, it was kind of being generated, which was quite interesting. And I remember like talking to Andy after the interview, and he was like, yeah, to be honest, I didn't even realize I was thinking about a lot of those things until like we started having a conversation about it. Like it was just like kind of percolating in the back of his mind. And he was while he was like making his music, yeah, because he's like so practice driven, and he's phenomenal. So it was a really special experience of like yeah, being able to like bear witness to that process. And I think it also made the interview process a little bit longer. Like we had a few goes, and we had a few goes at writing as well, like together, and it ended up being a really generative like experience, because we were able to kind of give form to what he was thinking through that conversation. And you know, I think that's like good writing. It's like when yeah, when you're able to give shape or form to things that were kind of ambiently lingering in the back of your mind, but you weren't able to articulate previously. So yeah, it was really special, and it was really awesome working with an old friend. So yeah, I feel very grateful for that.
That's so nice. I feel like
yeah.
it's like, I feel like interviewing, because sometimes it comes through the lens of journalism, is often seen as like abrasive or intrusive. Like you got to get the goss, and like the interviewer's like pulling out information like from the subject. But I think if you're a good interviewer, you're like, whether it's on the page or like on stage, like you need to have this mutual respect and regard. And like the conversation is always just going to be better if you actually like the person you're talking to, which goes both ways, right? They're not going to open up or feel like they can articulate themselves if they don't feel comfortable. Yeah. I guess interviewing is incredibly collaborative, hey?
Yeah, it's so stunning. It's a really interesting process. And yeah, that was the first interview I'd ever really done as well. Which I know that you do a lot of, Leah. So yeah, what about What about you? And like, how do you find the interviewing process? Because I guess I haven't interviewed that many people before, but you've just interviewed such a huge scope of people.
I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky. Though I feel like at the beginning, I mean, there've been interesting points to. So for those who are watching who don't know what Liminal is, we are I should have introduced it at the beginning, hey? I was like, if people come, they'll know what we're doing. But essentially we are 6 years old this year, and we publish interviews, art, writing, we run mentorships, residencies, an international writing workshop. But we began as an interview series because I just really wanted to talk to other Asian Australians who were making art because I couldn't see them, or yeah, it was just a very small seedling of wanting to meet other people and see if my experience was similar or not. For me, interviewing became really hard really fast because often if you create a really beautiful or like really not beautiful but like comfortable situation, a lot of trauma was being shared. So and it was really important for the trauma to come out, but I remember like sitting in my car just like weeping after these like in-person interviews because I couldn't be a receptacle in that way. And that was like a really big learning for me in terms of like how much what like at what point do you need to turn off empathy and turn on sympathy, like where does that kind of sit. So it really informed the way in which I interview people now, which is mostly in a kind of we mostly do emails back and forth to kind of build a conversation rather than in person, which is also like it's a bit sad because I really do like talking to people in person, but it was so intense those first few years that I had to stop. But yeah, I think we're up to 214 interviews now, which is wild. Yeah.
That's actually so slay. I love that so much. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's like when you start off a project and then like as you're working on the project, like you were saying before, like you realize that you couldn't cope with the content that was kind of like I couldn't cope with the content that was kind of being produced, and like just kind of recognizing the limits that you have as like an interviewer as well, and capacities, which is always interesting. And I think it's always happens in collaboration too.
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. Like it's hard to create like spaces. Like even if you want so much for the like collaborative space to be like safe, sometimes it's difficult to create those boundaries. So yeah, it takes time to work things out.
It's true. I guess that's also a good segue into my next question, which kind of responds to the previous question that we were talking about. But I wanted to ask you more about liminal collaborations rather than the interviews. Because like we were saying before, you were the mummy. Your role is not only writing, editing, and organizing, but also bringing together diverse groups of people. So I think liminal, like, it not only has this kind of like literary function, but I do think it has a community function and a social function as well. Like in the sense that it occupies such a significant space within the kind of Australian arts landscape. But yeah, I guess like what does like community mean to you? And maybe you can speak about this in relation to some of the projects as well. Like co-editing with Sher, commissioning writers, working with other arts organizations.
That's such a big question. I feel like there's a line in this. I'll find it. I feel like I spent so long writing this introduction.
It's amazing.
That I should like no, but it just took so long. I'm much more articulate in it than I am anywhere else. Let's see. I wrote, at the heart of Liminal is the desire to intervene in the racist structures that shape this country's cultural industries, imaginary landscapes, collective memories. We work against this landscape that is hostile to the simple matter of our existence, not to mention our labor, our desires, our dreams. So I feel like there's no way to do the work that Liminal is trying to do without other people. Like, to be like alone would be just to be like, it would be impossible. Like, Hannah has disappeared. Oh God. This is terrible. It's just my face now.
It's cool.
Hey, Jess.
Here we go. Hannah's just coming back in, everyone. Sorry about that. We'll get her back on right now.
I refuse to collaborate with myself.
I'm in China and my VP, like, there's like a big firewall, so like heaps of things are blocked, like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I think StreamYard must be blocked as well because it's connected to YouTube, but I just dropped out. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I feel like someone just said, speaking of being alone, yes, I was like, it's impossible to be alone, and then you just disappeared.
You're tired
Professional. I feel like the work that Liminal does needs to very much be like in the service of others. And like community is a very tricky word in the arts. I think at its worst, it can be really easily weaponized and kind of emptied of meaning or used as marketing fodder. But I feel like at its best, which we're always striving towards, sometimes we fail, but we're always trying to get there. I think community can be like a kind of home and a place of generosity and goodwill and a kind of almost like something to strive for, like something you're always working on. It's kind of like always in motion. Something that's generative and ongoing. And I guess that's like kind of why we're structuring this whole conversation in terms of how we've worked together, because it's like 4 years of just like, yeah, something that was very small and generative. What else did you Sher. Yes, I love working with Sher Tan, who's my co-editor on Liminal. I think what makes our collaboration so special is that we're both like, we're very aware of what our roles are, which is important, but also very like sensitive to the ways in which we're different. And this often works to our advantage. So like, say when we're writing a grant together or running a project, we take work on that the other isn't keen on, or we know who will be better at whatever. And it's great because like, we're not the same person, and it means like we make better work for it. Like, yeah, I feel really lucky to be editing with Cher.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, yeah, that kind of redistribution of labor in different ways. So it actually just makes it so much more enjoyable.
Yes.
Yeah. And what you were saying before is so interesting as well with like like the kind of like negotiating like difference and then also unity as well, like these kind of two antagonistic poles. And also community and also antagonism are two things that you have to constantly kind of
absolutely. I love this
because it's not all rosy all the time.
No.
There's so much, and so much.
Yeah. You were saying before the session started that it's like antagonism can be generative. Do you want to speak a little bit to that before we get to our next section?
Yeah, of course. I guess I was like kind of thinking about like I guess like Homike Baba like writes a lot about this as well. But like just the kind of way in which like in every kind of split, like in every kind of place, there's so much like heterogeneity and difference to contend with, even within like cultural groups that have this kind of like veneer of like unity and compliance and everyone kind of being driven towards the same goal. And just like kind of working through those antagonisms and finding that those negative reflections can also produce really positive outcomes as well. Like, I don't know, like maybe you can even think about that in relation to like relationships. Like you still learn a lot from negative interactions and relationships that kind of encourage you to change, and it fosters change by
Yeah, no,
having
absolutely.
rub against each other, which I think is quite interesting in the context of community and kind of collaboration as well, because that's also bound to happen in any kind of circumstance. But yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I think these things make doing live events online much more interesting, to be honest. Bye, Mr. Wu. I guess let's move on to these books, because I feel like I'm really proud of these. And I'm so like honored that you're all not in just one but two. Like, it really shows how talented you are as a writer, that you can span fiction and non-fiction. I know you'll make that face. For those watching, Hannah wrote Dried Up in a Raucum for this book, which is brilliant. And for this one, which was published last year, an essay which includes Mr. Wu, called Replica. This was really written in like the deep, dark depths of lockdown. And we can get to that in a sec, but I know I'm opening myself up to criticism here. Is there anything you'd like to say generally about what makes a good editor-writer relationship? Because I edited Hannah for these books.
Yes. Yes. So yes. Leah already knows this, so I have a lot of feelings about those works. Yes, so I think those works are really interesting, just because they were born out of a very particular time of like collective insanity. I think just like everyone was kind of insane over lockdown. And also I think just like being alone also made that writing process so insular, like profoundly insular, because you know, you don't have all the same people that you talk to in the process of writing, and just it was a very strange time. And I think because of that, writing it was like I was just so in my head the entire time, and I'm sure everyone's had this like experience with writing, because you're always in your head when you're writing, because you're trying to like re-narrativize you know, your life, or you know, reconstruct kind of moments if you're writing creative nonfiction. And honestly, Leah was the kind of game changer in that writing process. Like, she literally had to perform surgery on that piece throughout the entire writing and editing process. Like, I cannot emphasize how much she had to intervene. She was kind of like pulling me out of like a lake while I was drowning. That's honestly what it was. But yeah, she just Leah did this amazing thing where she like just like broke the piece down, reconstructed it completely in order to bring it to life. And it was literally stripped down from like a 5,000 word piece to like a 3,000 word piece. I think that process was so necessary for the birth of that piece, because if you hadn't done that, I just wouldn't have finished it. It's literally true though.
That was my sense at the time. I think I am normally not as interventionist as an editor, but there was something so golden there. It was hard not to try to pull it out.
Oh, thank you. It was yeah, I think that's also like the role of the editor too, right? Is like kind of establishing like what the needs of your kind of like the writer that you're working with is too. Not that I'm an editor, I'm completely speaking like without any kind of like experience, but yeah, like I feel like you were really able to like determine what I needed in that time. Like you said, like you wouldn't necessarily have been that hard like with like reconstructing the piece with like other people, but like that, you know, like you're kind of like performing the role that I needed you to be in that time. But yeah, like I wouldn't have been able to write it without your guidance and your like really wise advice, and like also unrelenting patience. Because Leah had to like only deal with one crazy writer, which was me, but 10 crazy writers over the course of lockdown and like making that book, which was nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No one's
guess,
crazy. Writers just all have feelings, right? Sorry.
We all have feelings.
I cut you off.
But yeah.
Continue.
I guess no. But yeah, I guess I think that is to say, in the like writing or collaborative relationship, as like being integral to developing the work. But like I think collaboration is also a form of like decentering the self, in the sense that you have to open yourself up in a way to the other, or like you have to kind of push past your own limits and boundaries in order to like displace your own subjectivity, so that like a new form can emerge from that. And yeah, like I really needed that at the time when you were editing. And I think because I'm like also quite prone to self-doubt and self-questioning, which I think any writer is, to be honest, if you're a writer, like that kind of self-interrogation. So yeah, it's really like important to share your work in order to develop your work. And that collaboration also means that you end up having someone supporting you the whole way, and also someone you support. Although it was definitely more Leah supporting me.
No, I think it's such a beautiful piece. I think you really managed to wrangle it out of a place into something really beautiful. I know you don't think that, but I think that.
Yeah. But yes. Yeah. But yeah, I think it also like required like that process of negotiation meant that I learned a lot through that process with Leah, and I had to rescind a lot of control and autonomy over the work in order to get it to that place. So having like another perspective really takes you out of your head and pushes it in different directions. So yeah, it was very like supportive, and while also like it taught me to be really receptive to criticism and change. And like I said, well, honestly, I had to like, you have to like sublimate criticism to make the work better, rather than feeling like over and overprotective over work. So I think that's a really important skill to learn, maybe as like in like
it's
writing.
So hard.
You know what I mean? But it's like so important like, to improve your writing. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what I want to say. But anyway. Sorry, I'm ages. Huh? I was like, sorry, I've been talking for ages.
No, I love it. I'm not going to edit you. No, I feel like the project, this book just kind of appeared out of this place where all of these writers who are all living in so-called Australia during these lockdowns just managed to create work which is so moving and so brilliant against it all, kind of like, I don't know. So it includes like 20 essays. I edited 10 of them, and Adolfo Aranjuez edited the other 10, and then I managed the whole project and with our beautiful publisher Pantera Press, and then also with the artist. So it feels like the biggest thing that I've done, and it's just very nice that you're in the book. Do we want to? I feel like we're on time. This is good. I guess our latest collaborate. Should we talk about a little bit our latest collaboration?
Yes.
This is gonna make me cringe because we're gonna play some of it and it's just my voice. I'm gonna have to stop my camera. So I think this is my favorite collaboration of ours. I think it's a bit funny because we didn't know it would be one from the beginning. I was asked to write an essay by the State Library of Victoria, which is actually currently playing in their gallery. And then they were like, we should add music to this. And the producer was like, do you know Hannah Wu? And I was like, I do. I would love Hannah to be able to make some music for my work. Should we play the piece and then talk about it? Because I haven't really spoken to you about how you made the music.
Yeah, let's do that.
Perfect. Jess. I feel like Jess is in the background. Perfect. If a photograph is a mirror, it is a mirror falling towards fracture. The blur of the fall happens just beyond the frame. Every photograph carries a trace of this fall, this beyond, the inevitable splintering of time and space. In recording what is seen, a photo also carries that which is not. Sometimes you don't notice the blur. Sometimes the photo fixes you, your gaze returned and returning. An indexical practice, photography is endlessly mistaken for a direct register of reality. Arresting time, the photograph conserves. To place a photograph into an archive, an exhibition, is to bring it into constellation, new meanings layering over the old. A photograph sits in generative impossibility. Stanley Waluka-Wanambwa writes, "The image simply cannot be held, cannot be fixed, cannot be fully and finally known, even when it sits neatly in the palms of our hands." Or perhaps John Berger will move you. He writes, "When we find a photograph meaningful, we are lending it a past and a future." If a photograph is a mirror, who do you find gazing back at you? If I asked you, who does the lending, whose pasts appear, whose future is foretold, would you be able to tell me without pause? Or maybe if I asked, where does the light fall, would you laugh, shrug, say, all around us? How does a photographer capture the light falling on her own face? And how does it fall on her subject? Or if we disregard the light, where does the photographer stand? Over their subject, their body looming over, looking down? Or do they kneel below? I am interested in who is afforded grace, who appears only in protest, or who is allowed a gentle domesticity. I would like to know who decides where the light falls, if it will keep falling, if it ever fell at all. Or maybe it is simpler than this. Maybe the question is, whose faces mirror your own? These faces are entered into the archive as testimony, as trace, as truth. Out of the 143 photographs in this exhibition, this portrait by Rennie Ellis captures me. It appears in the library's collection under the title Interior of Tattoo Parlour. A note on the record reads, title devised by cataloger. What compels me is the anonymity of these subjects, their reduction to nameless parts of the parlour interior. It is unknown if this is a careless elision of the artist or of the archive. So Alice captures the gaze, but the gazing subject is not named. What I want to know lies beyond the frame. I want to know who the subject was to the artist. But the information is missing, and all I am left with is this. If I am to lend a past and a future to this photograph, I would say that his gaze holds two things intertwined. Resignation and defiance. He seems resigned to being photographed. But he holds the gaze of the camera. And now he is here in the archive. And now he is here on the wall. And now he is here, defiant. If a photograph is a mirror, it is a mirror falling towards fracture. If a photograph is a mirror, it is a mirror falling towards Hello? Started replaying and I was like, I cannot possibly listen to my voice anymore.
I love that work. Leah, can I ask you a question about that work and just like
yeah,
the
of
process
course.
of writing it and coming up with the concepts and everything? It's just like I love it so much. It's so stunning. And maybe like talking through the premise of the project for State Library as well.
Yeah. So they approached, I think it's like 4 artists and 2 collectives. I might be wrong, it might be a few more people, to respond to 150 photographs from the State Library archives. I think they just typed in the word mirror in their database and they came up with these 100, I think it ended up being 141 photos. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And they were just like, respond to the work. So I think Alice Skye, the musician, did a really beautiful, I think she wrote a song for it. There's a bunch of really amazing work, which was terrifying because I didn't know really what it would look like for me. I've never written anything like that. And I guess as you were saying before with Brian Eno, I was in New York last year for research and I visited the MoMA and there was a Wolfgang Tillmans exhibition and I saw it and I was like, oh, this is it. I want people to be able to move, see photographs, huge photographs, but also really small imagery, and there should be some kind of aesthetic movement between the two. And then I was like, oh, I get this. And I think at the time I didn't really want to write about race, but it kept coming up and up and up again because I kept not seeing myself in any of the photographs except for this photo, the one that is by Rennie Ellis at the end. And then when I was looking through all the information in the archive, there was no information on who he was. And I talked to the archive, so the library, and they were like, well, he could have been named by Rennie Ellis, but there's so much information in all his journals that we can't find the title. And I was like, this is also a problem. It's not just Rennie Ellis not naming him. Rennie Ellis could have named him, but it's also the problem of the archive. So I began thinking about what it could mean, how a photograph works, how a photograph pretends it is objective reality or has pretenses towards it, but in fact is a very curated thing. So I guess that's the gesture behind it, is I had to think through how I wanted it to look visually, and then also how I how I was feeling as a writer, and finding ways to make the words kind of make sense with the photos in a way that I didn't feel was going to be too abrupt or harsh. Like I wanted the watcher to be able to understand, or to kind of create like their own interpretation of what I was trying to say. There's one question. The iterative nature. I'd love to hear about the iterative nature of the work, how the images inform the words and music and changes made along the way. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm interested in how the music kind of, because so Hannah and I were actually just at uni and we ran into each other, and she just received the email being like, oh, you're going to put some music to Leah's work. And I was like, hi, let's look at my work on this. I think we were sitting on a bench and we're just going through this PowerPoint. But yeah, how did you feel about making the music, the sound?
Oh, that's a beautiful. I just want to keep hearing you talk about the work because it's so interesting, and like just all the illusions of the archive and the photographs and index. I love that work so much. So can we come back to it afterwards? Yes. Yes. To that question, I'd love to hear about iterative nature of the work, how the images inform the words and music and changes made along.
Yeah.
I think that for that for Leah's essay, I remember just like watching it in Anton's studio, who was producing the show, and it was like 1 a.m. and he was pulling an all-nighter trying to get all the works like sorted for for that exhibition. He was just like haggard, like awful, like having the worst time. And I was just eating a little like kebab sticks. And then he showed it to me and I was like eating my kebab stick and I was just like, oh my God, this is like amazing. Because he was still in the process of cutting and editing and putting it together. And then yeah, it was really special. Just like I think the composition process was mainly like re-listening to Leah's work over and over again and thinking about the kind of textures that the words were producing. So I tried to make the work kind of almost a little bit call and response, like there's small embellishments around specific words that I think were weighted in Leah's essay. And I was doing like a little residency at NES, Melbourne Electronic Sound Studio. So I was really lucky to be using the synthesizers to make the work. And I was just like trying out all these new sounds. And I think because there were like kind of several themes throughout the essay. So I was trying to really like, the sound's really abstract, but I was trying to produce the sound of light, which is which is what I was trying to get at conceptually. And there's kind of small tinkly sounds and embellishments that kind of work throughout your that work to like respond to kind of your words throughout the essay, and also in response to the iterative nature of it, in terms of like producing like a kind of ground that was static, and then kind of adding embellishments over the top that respond to the text. I guess like the kind of iterative nature of the work is interesting because I guess the more that you listen to that refrain of that like over and over again, the more it disappears into the background, and then the words kind of become more prominent as the piece goes on, because that's like what happens like in your brain when you're like listening to repetitive sounds. You start to kind of just become acclimatized to them. So yeah, I was kind of like playing with that like push and pull of like it kind of being in the foreground and then fading into the background as the text kind of goes on, and then the embellishments. Yeah, I was just kind of trying to capture that kind of like that texture of light or that sound of light. Yeah, I guess that's I think that's what I was trying to do when I was like trying to conceptualize the music. I'm not sure if it was that successful though, because I think it was quite okay. Like, in the sense that I don't think you would have gotten that if you listened to it. But that's where my head is.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It feels like I was being read really closely, almost like in the same way that I edited you for Against Disappearance. You like made, like, the music makes such an intervention into the work. And it's so cool, I think, that you're both, like, you're multimedia, like, you're a musician and a writer, so you understand how, like, the flow of language works alongside sound. It's so, like, such a cool, I don't know, what is it, double agent. Are any no more questions? I don't think. I'm so sick of my own voice. So, but I think
just the content of the essay because it's so beautiful.
I feel like if anyone did like it, the rest of the pieces are up in the State Library and they're running on a loop, and it's free and it will be up till January. Yeah, I feel it's quite funny because as an interviewer, I'm always like, I want to know more. But as an artist, I'm like, I just want the work to speak for itself. So I feel like, yeah, I wonder if as arts workers who are in so many different roles, like you're also a researcher. We never got to talk about Fred Moten and Stefano Hani. I feel like the best of the best collaborators, which Hannah is researching Fred Moten at the moment. But I just feel like there's so much, as an emerging writer, there's so much you can be doing, and there's so, like, it's just exciting. It's exciting being alive, and it's exciting making work with other people, and it's exciting acknowledging that you're not a solo genius. You actually need all of these people and all of these friends, and yeah, it's been such a nice time being in conversation with you, Hannah.
Yeah, it's been so beautiful to be in conversation with you too. You're the best. Also, can I just say one more thing in relation to just in relation to one of the comments that was in the chat? I just remembered this. Wait.
Is it your dad?
It's not about my dad. But it I hadn't actually thought about it, but I just remembered that there was like a photo that I took on my phone the other day of a little like a little piece of writing, but one of the comments was, yes, the sound of light, so compelling, especially in relation to photography. But yeah, the word photography originates from the Greek word phos, which is light, and then graphis, which is graph. So it literally means to draw with light, referring to the process of recording a series of changing images with special devices. So yeah, yeah, so it's to record a single image by exposing reflected off an object. Anyway,
an image to end on. I think. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Mo. Thanks, Anna. It's been a pleasure. Yeah. See you later. Go collaborate with some people. Please. Bye. Bye.